All right. Hello and welcome to Just Animals podcast. I'm Elle, and with me, as always, is my dad, Guy.
Hello, Pod World. I'm out of my normal environment, but
Okay.
still in a friendly one.
All right, whatever that means. And today, with us joining us from Sweden, actually, and from the Sweden University of Agriculture Sciences, Dr. Matt Lowe. We're going to be talking about a very interesting animal today, and I'll let Matt take it from there, just kind of give a little background on who he is and this interesting bird we will be discussing.
Thank you. Yes, I'm sitting in Sweden at the moment. My position here is I do research, mostly working with statistics and population ecology and working with endangered species and that sort of stuff, mostly from behind my computer. Before I came to Sweden, a long time ago, about 20 years ago, first of all, I was a veterinarian in Australia. That was my background. And then after about 5 years of being a vet, I quit that and went into the mountains of New Zealand to sort of find something else to do. And while I was there, I started to work with conservation problems and projects in New Zealand. And then I came across this bird species that's only found in New Zealand. It hadn't been studied a lot, and it had a very peculiar behavior that I was sort of interested in to find out a little bit more. So that's what we're going to talk about today is this bird called the Stitchbird, which is found only in New Zealand. It also comes with another name, which is commonly referred to as the hee. It has a bunch of other names, but usually you'd hear it referred to as the Stitchbird or the hee. But just to sort of try and capture the imagination of the podcast audience to keep them holding on here, we're going to talk about weird sex behavior in this bird today.
Yes, weird animal sex.
That's always
Yay!
that's always good to keep the audience engaged. No question about that.
And not to be too crass, has anyone ever called you the bird pervert?
The bird pervert.
Uh, Not to my face, probably behind my back plenty of times.
I was reading your article this morning, and your self awareness of the situation that you were in was very funny. But when those other bird watchers came upon you as you're narrating, talking into your dictaphone as these birds are doing their bird thing, I'm sure that was quite a sight.
Yeah. I mean, I spent about 3.5 years on a little island off the coast of New Zealand where this bird was that I was studying, and to follow a bird around in the forest, you need to take notes, so you can't be writing things down because you have to take your eyes off the bird to do that. So I had this little dictaphone and a little voice activated microphone. And so every time the bird would do something, I would sort of talk into this and describe exactly what was happening. And the incident you're referring to there, Al, is I was walking along following these birds that were having this sort of quite aggressive sexual encounter, describing it in the forest, and this was before iPhones and people were used to seeing people walking around talking to themselves. This was 20 years ago.
Right.
uh, yeah, so it was a bit different then, and there was this group of bird watchers standing there looking quite puzzled at this person who's walking through the forest talking about a bird that's having sex to themselves without realizing that I was actually doing something a bit more scientific and not just
Right.
completely
It's like, this is legitimate. I'm a researcher. I'm a scientist, I swear.
Is the
exactly.
Stitchbird only found in New Zealand? Is that the only habitat?
Yeah.
And is it
Yeah,
only on
and
that?
it used to be found. So New Zealand is sort of made up of two main islands, the North and the South Island, and it was found across the whole of the North Island until the late 1800s, and then it disappeared completely. And this is sort of a whole aspect of what I was working with as well is conservation of New Zealand birds. So what happened was when white colonists came to New Zealand in the late 1700s, early 1800s, they brought with them ship rats and Norwegian rats and weasels and cats and ferrets and all these other sorts of things. And the amazing thing about New Zealand is when it sort of broke away 70, 80 million years ago to be by itself, it essentially didn't carry any mammals with it at all. So this became this huge island archipelago, which was just full of birds and insects and lizards. There's no mammals. There's no native mammals to New Zealand, with the exception of a couple of species of bat and a sea lion that comes on the coast. Otherwise, no mammals. So these birds evolved over the next 70 million years without having to deal with what mammals do to you. And mammals eat birds. So
Right. So
when Yeah, so when the white colonists came in the late 1700s, early 1800s, they brought these rats and everything, and this essentially wiped out this bird from the whole of the North Island. It was gone from everywhere except one small island off the coast of Auckland, and that was um, it was quite a long way off the coast, so rats and things couldn't swim out there, and it was a sanctuary, and this was the only place that survived. And then what happened was when I became involved with it, it was not on this island, which was the sanctuary where these birds survived and clung on to. It was another island. So within New Zealand, they're trying to save a lot of these species by putting them onto other islands, by finding places or trying to eradicate these mammals and then putting the birds back and hoping they survive. So I was working on one of these islands where they'd put the birds back,
okay.
hoping to
So
get
the
them to
bird
survive.
was initially on the
North
Yeah,
Island.
the
main.
mainland. Yeah. So there was probably hundreds of thousands, or if not millions, of these birds, and within the space of 100 years, they were all gone. And this happened across many bird species in New Zealand. So it's a huge
Yeah.
conservation issue there, and sort of almost an emergency, which is where in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of work being done just to save what was left. And now the huge, amazing effort they've done there is they've pioneered, and this has been taken up all over the world now, how to eradicate these invasive mammal species off islands and on mainland areas. And so they're starting to repopulate. The ones that survive, they're actually improving their chances. They're actually doing amazing conservation work there.
So Hawaii has a big problem with
Feral
birds and
cats
feral
on the other
cats.
side of the Pacific, same issue, island
Yep,
issues with
same issue.
introduced mammals that are just wreaking havoc on native species.
Exactly, and the Seychelles and Mauritius and all sorts of islands from the Pacific and the Indian Ocean, and down in the subantarctic ocean as well, because the sailors there in the 1800s released goats and rabbits and all sorts of things for food, and so there's, I mean, it's a disaster, but at the same time, in the last 20 years or 30 years has been a huge conservation success story, because these pioneers that originally started in New Zealand trying to work out ways to get rid of these mammals that we'd put there have developed these amazing ways. There's been these huge success stories to get rid of mammals and reintroduce the original birds and all sorts of things. So we tend to get depressed with conservation stories because things generally don't go well. But these are real success stories. So we see these, we're actually making things better again, which is really impressive. And that's kind of where this story is located. It's within this problem of conserving birds. And that's not why I was studying them. I mean, I was there to deal with the kinky sex behavior that we'll get into. But it was part of this broader sort of conservation program that I guess I was involved with in working there.
With the conservation program, you're trying to save one species, and then you sort of have to eradicate / control a different species. Do you get any pushback from people saying, "Hey, you're killing the cats," or "You're killing"? Rats are pretty universally disliked, but I
Yes.
imagine, you probably get some cat lovers that say, "Hey, you're killing cats to save these birds." Where is how do you balance it? How do you allocate? I mean, if the one species is eradicating another species, that's important. But so have you ever experienced pushback
Yeah,
from?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, in New Zealand, they've been pretty good because there's been kind of this public education campaign for a very long time about the problems with mammals, and New Zealanders kind of understand it. And there's not that much, I guess, pushback there. One of the issues, I guess, on this island where the Stitchbird survived, there was actually a mammal species on there. So when the Polynesian when the Maori came in the 1400s, so they were the first colonizers of New Zealand, human colonizers. So the original indigenous people there, they brought with them the Kiori, which is the Polynesian rat. So it came with them, and the Polynesian rat was on this island. Now it's not as destructive as the ship rat or the Norwegian rat. It still causes problems. It was some insect species on this island they wanted to conserve. So they really wanted to get rid of this rat off this island. but it's part of the Maori culture, so it's sort of part of their history. There's it's not a simple solution there to just say, well, let's just go kill all the Kiori. You need to get you really need to be supported by the local iwi, which is the different tribes of the Maori around New Zealand. So there needed to be consultation there for that. Otherwise, there could have been pushback in that particular case.
Right. Right.
In other parts of the world, yeah, you can get these things if you're eradicating. In New Zealand, they're pretty good at sort of supporting these conservation efforts. But it's yeah, dealing with welfare issues of killing something to save something else.
Right.
It's a tricky area. Yeah.
Right. Right. Of course. So, how big is this bird? Is it on this? Is it like a finch size, or is it more?
Yeah, it's about 30 to 40 grams. So it's like I mean, bigger than a sparrow, but not probably much bigger than a sparrow. It's kind of
Okay.
small.
Okay.
You can hold it in your hand. It's like a little bird. It's not
Okay.
tiny, but it's
Right.
smallish.
Okay.
Is there anything unique to that environment of that island that supports the
Besides
bird?
the lack of mammals.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it needs because this is a bird that feeds a lot on nectar. So it also takes fruit and it takes insects, but it feeds a lot on nectar. And originally, it was thought to be one of the in Australia. You have the honey eaters, which are the family of birds that just feed on nectar primarily.
Okay.
And this was thought to be one of the three honey eaters of New Zealand. There's the tui, the bellbird, and what was thought the stitchbird. And so you need to have an intact forest because as soon as you start to take the forest down, they don't have the nectar resources all year round. But this forest, this island still had all of that there. It had the cavities. So they nest inside the trees. They don't build nest cups outside the trees. They nest inside. So you needed to have this sort of old growth forest. And luckily, this was preserved on this island, which allowed it to survive.
How do they get inside the trees? Are there woodpeckers in New Zealand that are opening them up, or insects that are opening the trees up, or do they do it themselves?
Good question. No, there's no woodpeckers. There's nothing like that in New Zealand, actually. So this would just come from natural cavities actually occurring in the trees. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and them utilizing that.
Okay.
I have an
Gotcha.
off-topic question. In Australia, do veterinarians are they responsible also to inspect meat? Like we have the United States Department of Agriculture that they're in the processing plants and looking at chickens and cows and lamb and making sure they're healthy or before they can be put out for public consumption. Does Australia
Yeah.
use veterinarians for that as well?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So when I was doing in vet school, one of the things we had to do was go to an abattoir and go through all the sort of stuff that the vets actually work with in those environments. So yeah, absolutely.
Let me translate that for our American audience.
Slaughterhouse.
Slaughterhouse.
Slaughterhouse. Sorry.
Yeah,
Well,
I get it. I love the
yeah, no,
word.
that sounds much nicer than
We
slaughterhouse.
yes, we found that word out from another Australian
From
person.
Mark Pearson
Was that
from
the?
New South Wales.
It was
Yes.
kangaroos, right, or something? When they
Maybe it was Auntie Row. But anyways, back to this
yes,
Stitch bird. So, how long do they live? Are they
Yeah, I mean, small birds don't live long lives. The longest one when I was there was a male. He lived to about 9 years of age. Most of them probably, I mean, once they survived the first year of age, then they would probably live to about 4 or 5 on
Oh,
average,
wow.
I guess.
how many are in a litter? Do they call it
It's a
litter?
clutch.
Oh,
A clutch of birds. They would lay 4 eggs on average, sometimes 3 or 5, but it's very it's kind of small. But they'll often fledge 3 or 4 chicks quite commonly. So they'll sort of push out, and then they can have two of these a year. So they can potentially push out probably 7 or 8 chicks if they're going to have two clutches in a year.
So why are they technically not a honey eater then, even though they eat nectar?
Yeah, exactly. Everyone thought they were. They look like them. And then Amy Driscoll in the 1990s was doing her PhD, and she wanted to sort of classify them all based on their evolutionary relationship. So she got samples of all the Australian honeyeaters and the New Zealand honeyeaters and then tried to plug it in. And then this one thing popped out and said, this doesn't fit. This is completely different from everything else. So it turned out it's in its own bird family all by itself.
Okay, they're quite interesting looking. I mean, maybe they haven't caught on to the fact that blackface is no longer socially acceptable, but They've got those, the black upper half and then that bright yellow. And are they mostly just black and yellow, or do they come in any
Yeah,
other colors?
the female and the male are very different from each other. So the female's kind of a brownish grey. She doesn't have the black head or the yellow. She just has a white wing stripe. And then the male, the bottom half of his body essentially looks like the female with the white wing stripe. But then he has, like you say, the jet black head. He has a yellow stripe around his shoulders, and then on his ears he has these two white patches, and they can actually stand out like these little fans that come out when he's displaying, which is kind of
Oh, wow.
cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Did,
They do have like little white ear
didn't we have a
patches.
bird like this that came to our hummingbird feeder in Las Vegas?
Maybe. I don't know.
It was a bird that looked like this. It obviously was not this bird, but there was.
They're quite round, barrel chested.
Yeah, they're chunky. I mean, they're not like hummingbirds. They're not these little fine things that have to
No,
migrate across half the planet.
no, they are chunks. It makes it even more interesting that they're able to fly. So will they migrate at all, or are they station? Will they just stay where they are?
No, they stay where they are. They don't. I mean, they're good flyers over short distances, but they don't really go anywhere else. I mean, the island I was working on, it was only sort of 800 meters or so off the mainland, and none of them ever flew across to the mainland. So they sort of stay where they are.
Okay,
They
okay, so they stay put.
How's the
Interesting.
population doing?
So we don't really know on the island where they survive. The estimate is kind of people just pick a number out of the air. It's about 2,000 or 3,000. It depends who you ask on what day. What has happened since then is they've tried to create new populations to try and secure the species. So there was on the island I was on, Tiri Tiri Martangi, and then they were put on another island, and then there's these three other sites on the mainland of New Zealand where they essentially put a big fence around it, kill all the mammals inside it, and then sort of put birds in there and they can thrive in there. So there's five other sites where they are, but these only number in their hundreds at the most across all of those sites.
Wow.
Is that what's known as translocation? It says
Yeah,
establish
exactly. Yes,
sustaining
yes,
population.
translocation ecology there. Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I know you said you fenced off areas, and we had Paul O'Shea on from Kiwis for Kiwi. Would they? Was it possible they put Kiwis back in those areas too, where they were fencing them off and having these secure no mammal zones?
Yeah, yeah. So if you live in Wellington, where they filmed a lot of Lord of the Ringsy stuff, in the middle of Wellington, there's this old um, reserve where sort of the water supply of Wellington was, and they essentially stuck a fence around that about 20 years ago. And so you're in suburbia in Wellington, and there's kiwi next door. You can hear them calling. There's all the parrots in there. There's the stitchbirds in there. There's everything sort of coming back, and they the kiwis, of course, can't fly, but anything can fly that goes out into the suburbs during the day and then sort of comes back in. So people have this amazing set of birds now, which are sort of spilling out from this sanctuary into the suburbs of
That's
Wellington.
great. Okay, so this
Very cool.
bird comes from Middle Earth. Noted. Got it. That's probably why it's kind of different. Very
What's
cool.
interesting here, I'm reading somebody says that the island was declared a bird sanctuary in 1894. That's pretty forward thinking. I wouldn't, I didn't think that back in 1894 people
Especially colonizers.
were worried about preserving anything, except
Yeah,
themselves.
actually, there was in the late 1800s. They already recognised what the rats and things were doing to these birds. And so there's another iconic New Zealand bird called the kakapo, which is the biggest parrot
Oh, the big
in the
parrot,
world.
right?
About four
Right.
kilograms, doesn't fly, sort of a thing. And I mean, they're doing pretty well now, but they got down to about 50 left, and they thought they were actually going to be extinct. But in the 1800s, there was a guy who went out to an island on the South Island, and he took 300 kakapo out there, and he took about 300 kiwi out there. He was trying to save them, and everything was fine for a few years. But then weasels and stoats swam out to the island and killed all the birds that he took out there.
Oh, God.
They,
So yeah, I know, terrible. But even from the 1800s, they were trying to they recognised what the problem was, and they were trying to do something
right.
about it.
I didn't know how. I mean, so it must not have been that far if a weasel and a stoat can swim to it. I mean,
They can swim about up to 2 kilometres, so through the
okay, so they're
water.
like the Ian Thorpe of the weasel world. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So they have sort of these. They know which islands are safe and which ones are not, and they have to keep monitoring the ones that are not and keep eradicating from those if they have.
That's so crazy that they
Yeah,
did the. It's like we're out of food. We're going to swim over here. Come on, everyone. Let's swim over
yeah.
here.
I know,
Wow.
madness. I know.
That's wild. I mean, okay, yeah, you kind of we're gonna have to go back to this weasel and stoat thing later, but um, so they eat nectar and honey, and then are they any insectivores at all, or just strictly the
Yeah,
honey?
yeah. I mean, the clue that they probably weren't honey eaters is they've got these whiskers around the base of their beak. So insectivore birds have these specialized feathers that look like a cat's whiskers around the base of their beak. And the reason for that, it's exactly the same function as a cat's whiskers, is when mobile prey gets close enough to your face, you can't see it anymore. You need tactile things to tell you where it is. So the stitchbird has these very obvious bristles around their face, which indicates that they take insects as well. So
Interesting. Okay.
primarily, they do that when they're feeding their chicks for the
Right.
protein to
Okay. I
help their
was gonna
chicks to
say, how
grow.
do you, I imagine regurgitating nectar is probably not the most, energy efficient or well, not
No,
healthy, but nutrient dense for little chicks. But
yeah,
there
exactly,
we have
exactly.
it. Okay, so let's get into the bird sex, and they do seem a little rapey when I was reading the
What?
article. It's a
Yeah,
kind of animal nature in general, though. Consent is
yeah.
clearly not a thing in the
Are they
animal kingdom.
monogamous? Or there's no monogamy?
Yeah, well, it depends what you define as monogamy. The male and the female will pair up as a single pair. So, in terms of if you look at them from the outside, they're monogamous. So, I'll sort of take you through what happens during a
This
typical
is just
breeding season for these birds. I'll walk the listener through. So, you go along and you would see this male bird calling, doing his sing song, and the female bird busy gathering food and then building the nest. And you sort of think, oh, this is a nice, lovely view of sort of bird domestic bliss. And then everything's fine until about, when would you say? Probably about 7 or 8 days before she's going to lay her first egg. Now, the thing to remember with birds is that, I mean, like in all animals, you need sperm and you need an egg to create offspring. And so in the sort of lead up time to when the female lays her first egg. Now, birds lay one egg every day. They don't lay all their eggs at once. They lay one egg, and then the female will ovulate the second egg, and it takes a day for it to go through her reproductive tract, and she lays the second egg. Then she ovulates again. So each day she ovulates a new egg, and it takes 24 hours to go through her reproductive tract, and then she lays in the nest. And the female will mate with the male and store sperm in her reproductive tract. And it will live for a number of days. So about 7 days before she's going to lay her first egg, she's already built her nest. And if you're walking around there, you'll suddenly start to hear one or two other males calling around in the vicinity. And the male, the partner of the female, he'll chase them away. And then as you get closer and closer and closer to that time when she's going to lay that first egg, more and more and more activity starts coming in until it's like Grand Central Station. It's just pandemonium. You walk into this bird's territory and there are birds flying everywhere. There's males just going crazy. The male that lives in the territory, he's trying to get rid of everybody. He's chasing everyone left, right, and center. The female, meanwhile, she needs to eat because she has to produce eggs. So she is just focused on getting as much food in as she can. So she sort of can't pay attention. She needs her mate to keep away all of these others that are trying to essentially impregnate her. They want to be the fathers of her chicks. And then what you see is you see something kind of really unusual. So the stitchbird, and this is what sort of got me interested. I heard about this. And this gets us back to the conservation thing. So the stitchbird was kept in captivity as well in this place called the Mount Bruce Wildlife Centre. And while they're in captivity, someone made a short note in a journal saying, this bird has sex in the missionary position. It has sex face to face. So the female's on her back and the male is lying down on top having sex. Now, I just want to unpack that a little bit because some of your listeners might not realize how unusual that is. It's the most common sexual position for humans. All right. So there's lots of different sexual positions we have, but the missionary position is the most common. And I looked it up on Wikipedia just before I came on here, just to make sure I got my facts right.
You read it on the internet.
So,
Doctor.
and there's very, very, very few other animals that ever have face-to-face sex. The female stands and the male mounts from behind. And it's the same across the entire bird world. The female stands, the male sort of climbs onto her back, And then he transfers the sperm into from his cloaca to her cloaca, and then he hops off, and they both shake themselves, and off they go. Okay, in the Stitchbird, I mean, the fact that no one had ever seen another bird ever in the world to have sex in the face-to-face position, and that's what sort of I thought, crikey, why do they do that? And that's what sort of got me interested and got me into following these birds for years on this island, just watching them, trying to work out why they're doing this.
Right.
And what you'll see is it's not her mate. If the male who has the territory with the female, if he has sex with her, she stands like every other bird in the world. He climbs onto her back and they mate in the normal bird sex position, birdie style or whatever we want to call it. If an intruding male catches the female, she doesn't want to mate with him, and he will actually wrestle her to the ground. He will then flip her onto her back. He will use his wings to hold her, to pin her to the ground, and then he will actually forcibly mate with her in this face-to-face position. So it's forced. It's a sexual coercion. It's kind of nasty,
Yeah.
Wow.
and that's how the birds do it. And of course, well, I mean, and then they fly off, and then now if the whenever another male is trying to catch the female, she has a very specific alarm call. She only uses when she's being chased by another male. And this is a high-pitched sound, rapidly repeating, and it makes it really easy to locate her position. And you might think,
Right.
why does she want to advertise her position? Well, she wants to tell her mate exactly where she is because she's calling for help. She's calling for him to essentially knock this other one out of the park. So he will, if he's nearby, he will fly in and he will attack that other male and chase it out. And then the female will go completely silent and she'll disappear again. So she's trying to hide from all these males while this is happening. They're trying to find her. Her mate's trying to chase them out. So that's what you see inside these territories during this time.
So they're opportunistic. Like if they're chasing off her mate is chasing off another male, then they're like, "Oh, I
Exactly.
have a chance. Here we go."
Exactly. And sometimes what they'll do is they'll actually come in quietly. They'll actually walk in to so these birds are normally flying around. So they'll actually walk in under the leaf litter and they'll just camp and they'll just sit there silently and wait for her to come past. Then they'll just jump and they'll leap out and sort of try and catch her by surprise. So you see this sometimes as well. So you have no idea there's a male around. And then suddenly the female starts screaming and you see this bird's just come out of nowhere and grabbed her. And then his mate has to her mate has to sort of fly in and try and knock him out. And if he's quick enough, he'll be able to impregnate the female and be gone.
Wow. That
Yeah,
ambush,
it's,
ambush.
yeah,
Wow.
That's
yeah,
quite.
yeah,
I mean, and you wouldn't. I mean, they're cute little fat birds. You wouldn't think that they were that. From a human standpoint, it's like that seems very violent and forceful.
yeah. It's kind of violent. I mean, and the thing is, so there's all sorts of things happening here. And the questions I was interested in is, well, first of all, was why they were doing it, and it seems to be it's a forced sex thing. So it's for males who the female otherwise wouldn't mate with. This is their way of trying to do this. One of the questions I had was, well, how do they know that the female is about to lay her eggs?
Oh,
Hmm.
right. Yeah.
And because these birds, to me they look the same, and then suddenly she pops an egg out. I mean, how do they know? But they know. And and on this island, because it didn't have the sort of forest that the birds need, they had to put out sugar water feeding stations to support the birds. There was nest boxes. There was all sorts of things to support the birds because of this conservation issue we talked about earlier. And so we'd have these communal feeding stations where the birds would come in to take nectar. And what you would see is you'd see a female who would fly in and she'd be at this period just before she lays her eggs. And essentially she'd fly in and every male's head would just look at her and then she'd just fly off screaming with all these males coming after her. And so it was obvious that you could just tell by looking at the female that she was fertile. She was about to lay her eggs. Whereas
Right.
another female could fly in and they wouldn't even give her a second glance. So how did they know? And the clue came from, so I was doing some work in my third year there. I had these scales, these electronic scales I put out near these feeding stations. And so every time a bird came in to feed, I could weigh it. And so I was
Right.
recording their weights. And you saw the females, they'd be sitting at about 30 grams steady. And then about
Mhm.
7 days before, they'd go up to 31 grams and 32 grams. And every day they'd sort of be gaining a gram.
Oh,
And just
wow.
before they lay their eggs, they've gained about 30 to 40% of their body weight. because
Oh,
they're
wow.
producing these. They've got these massive ovaries. I mean, they've got the yolks of all these chicks they're going to lay sitting in their bellies.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
you imagine putting on 40% of your body weight in a week,
No,
and you
thank you.
have to fly, and
No.
somehow you have to disguise that from anyone else. Well, these birds, I think these birds just see that this female is fat and heavy and she's having trouble flying. And this is who we pick on. This is a good indication that she's actually about to lay her eggs.
No, just the visual clues,
The chemoreceptors
not any
or
Well, we don't
pheromone.
know. I mean, we don't know a lot about smell in birds. It's possible. But here it seems so there was another bird species years before I did mine. Someone actually did an experiment where they injected water into the belly of birds, the females, to make them fat and heavy to the same sort of weight as they would be. And the males reacted to these females as if they were fertile. So it
oh,
seems
so it
that there
really
needs
is
to be,
visual
So
cues
it is a
then.
visual. Yeah.
it's a
Wow.
visual thing, but then whether or not they're fat or it's to do with their takeoff angle. So they actually looked at how they fly, they change their wing speed and all sorts of things. So it would be like, you look at a pregnant woman in our society, you can tell she's pregnant, but not just because she's got a bulge, but the way she moves and all sorts of
Right.
things. So I
Right.
think the birds are using these cues as well. Yeah,
Right. No, that makes sense if her takeoff would be a little different or if her flying pattern would be different to accommodate this bulbous belly, so to speak. That makes a lot of
stuff
sense.
in there.
But then
Yeah,
that also makes these birds, I mean, that's pretty damn observant.
So,
yeah,
so
yeah.
uh,
That's
you said
natural
that
selection for you.
Yes.
I think you said that the real dad does it the normal birdie way, and the other wannabe dads do it the missionary way.
Yeah.
Has any have you? I don't know if you've been able to tell that is the missionary way allowing the proper copulation for birth to happen?
Yeah. So the thing is and it had been discussed. So forced copulation, so this sort of aggressive copulation between males and females is not just found in birds, it's found all over the place in all sorts of different species. And it was thought that birds, this wasn't going to happen because if you're going to do it the birdie sex way, where the female stands and the male stands on the back, the female, you need a lot of coordination, you need a lot of balance. The female just needs to plant her tail on the ground, stick her bum down, and no one's getting anywhere near inseminating the female. So it's extremely difficult to inseminate a female bird unless she cooperates with you. Now, when the male is trying to force it on the female, she just simply doesn't have to cooperate. She can just clamp down and no one's going anywhere. So it was always thought that birds couldn't sort of achieve forced copulation because the female could sort of control this because
Right.
the male needs to balance on it.
Shut
She
it
can just
down.
knock him off. Except in ducks. You might have heard that ducks do this whole sort of
Yeah, they're kind of rapey
aggressive
too.
stuff. But ducks have one thing that almost all the other birds don't have. The ducks actually have a phallus or a penis. Okay, other birds don't have that. And it's thought that ducks have retained this because of this whole forced copulation thing. So that male can forcibly insert, but other birds don't have those. They lost their phallus. So about 97% of bird species don't have a phallus or a penis at all.
Interesting.
And so what you need to do, if the female is just going to be able to drop herself on the ground and stop you copulating, the only way to get around that is to basically flip her over on her back and expose the cloaca. And so then you can actually make contact with that. And this sort of gets into another thing I was interested in looking at, because these birds, if you think about, let's take a human example. We're kind of familiar with people. We have the men have a penis, and when it comes time to copulate, it doesn't just hang there. It actually changes direction. It sort of firms up and it changes. And that's because it's to do with copulation. And that's because the penis has two different functions. It's for getting rid of waste. You need to get rid of the excess water from your body. And so it needs to basically point down for you to do that. And then when you need to transfer sperm, you need it to point in a different direction. So it sort of changes. It needs to accommodate both. And now
That's why that
I was sort
happens.
of thinking in birds, can birds do the same thing? Because when if you think about a bird, when it goes to the toilet, it poos and it wheezes out backwards. It's got its
Right.
cloaca or its bum, it shoots everything out the back. Now imagine you're a male standing on the top of a female and you're cloaca. They've only got one hole at the back. Okay, it's their bum. It's their. It passes the egg or the sperm, depending on their male or female. It passes their urine. It passes everything. So they've just got one hole, the cloaca. It points backwards. Now, if you want to pass your sperm to a female you're standing on, you can't have it pointing behind you. You need it to sort of kind of point forwards because make contact with the female's reproductive system or the cloaca there. So we looked at, does a similar sort of erection type thing happen in birds? And no one had looked at this before. And what happens here is, and this goes, okay, I'm telling stories on stories. Now I have to sort of digress slightly more to talk about sperm.
Go for it.
Okay, so sperm doesn't live very long unless it's kept cool, which is why testicles tend to hang outside the body. Birds have testicles inside their body because of aerodynamics.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
They need to store their sperm somewhere else. And what they
Right.
do is the males will store the sperm under the skin around the cloaca, sort of around their bum. So there'll be this, if you look under the skin, there'll be these things where they store their sperm. And if you store enough sperm and you store it in the right way, it acts like a balloon. And they actually store it behind their cloaca. And it kind of elevates, it sort of creates this erection. As you store more and more and more sperm behind the cloaca, it changes the angle of it. So it goes from pointing backwards to basically pointing perpendicular to the bird. So they can
Okay.
use sperm storage to sort of get an erection during the whole breeding season.
Right. Okay. Wow.
So, and these birds produce a lot of sperm. So we had a bird that died by natural causes in one of the years I was there. And because I'm a vet, I used to open up all the birds and send samples off for pathology to make sure there was nothing weird going on the island. And we opened this male up, and it was right in the middle of the breeding season. And essentially his entire abdomen was made up of just two giant testicles. And they were the equivalent of, I mean, if you were a 70-kilogram man, this would be the equivalent of you having each testicle weighing about 3 kilograms each. So they were like footballs in there. They had these huge testicles
That's about
they're carrying up. And they've got to
American.
fly as well, remember. And
What is-
if you measure the
Hold on.
amount of sperm, they're storing about a liter, the equivalent of a liter of sperm of a person.
Quart.
That's how much sperm they're storing. Obviously, they're not storing it.
To American units.
How many
3
kilograms?
kg, that's like 8 pounds.
Okay, kilogram. Oh, okay. So there's what, 2.4 pounds or 2 pounds to a kilogram. Let's just say that's going to be about 12 pounds worth of testicles.
Yeah,
Wow.
each.
That's about where each, and then you've got, and then a liter. What's that? A quarter of a gallon. That helps.
It's about
Of
a quart. It's
sperm.
about, yeah, a quart is close.
Is that 24
Yeah.
ounces?
So they've got.
32.
They're packing a lot of sperm. And of course, you could ask, why do they need this sperm? And it all comes back to the fact that everyone's trying to mate with the same female. And one of the ways that you improve your chances of being the father is you essentially put more sperm in than your rivals. And so everyone's doing that. Everyone's producing more and more and more. Natural selection works on these males just to produce massive amounts of sperm to try and be the father if they actually manage to copulate.
So do
with the
they make
female.
a lot of testosterone then? Or I don't,
I guess
I mean,
they- I suspect they
that's
do.
got to kind of explain why they're super aggressive and forceful. It's got to be all that testosterone, right?
Yeah, and they also suffer from a number of immune-related diseases. So I mean, certainly testosterone's related to reduced immune function in some species. So there's been some idea that might be, we don't know, but it might be related to why some of these birds they get these respiratory illnesses and they die during the breeding season.
That can be your next study.
So is
Yeah,
there
so that's
are those? Is there a breeding season? You said it's twice a year they can have
Yeah.
lay fertilized eggs. So when do they typically? Is that what time of year do they doing that?
Spring and summer in New Zealand. So that's the opposite to the Northern Hemisphere. So they would start sort of October, November, they'd be laying their first clutches, raising them, and then probably December, January, they'd have their second clutches if they're doing those.
No.
And
And
then
how-
once February comes, then they stop breeding for the rest of the year.
Oh, okay.
How long do they hang out with the mom or in the nest?
The chicks,
Yes.
so the chicks are in the nest, in the cavity for about a month. They're in there for about 30 days before they come out. And then they hang around getting fed by mum probably for another few weeks before they start to become independent. And when they come out, they look like mum. Even the males and females come out looking exactly like mum. And they come out at the same weight as they really fill these birds up with food. So they come out at about the same weight as these fertile females. So what you'll see sometimes is these young chicks come out, they look like a female, they look like a fertile female, and the males will actually attack them thinking they want to. Yeah, I know. It's just
Oh,
it's one sad story after another when you're watching these birds in the wild.
this is wild. I mean, they should have their own HBO special.
Yeah, yeah, and the thing is you're there, and you kind of feel sorry for the, because I mean, of course you feel sorry for the female because she's just being harassed by these idiot males all the time, and then you sort of feel sorry for her partner because he's trying his best, he's doing everything he can to keep all these other males away, and if you measure his weight, which I did as well, he actually starts to lose weight, so he loses about 10% of his body weight in that week just trying to protect the female. And you feel really sorry for him, and you think, oh, you poor guy, you're doing your best. And then a week later, you'll be at a different territory, and then he'll be there as the intruding male because he's female. She's laid her eggs. I don't need to be there anymore. She's got my sperm. I've done my thing. Now I'm off to try and harass every other female on the island.
Nefarious activities.
Yeah.
Wow. Yes, you kind of
Mhm.
don't feel bad for him anymore.
No.
Wow.
So let me ask
So
you a question. When there's, I'm sorry to interrupt you. When there's a
no.
small population of animals, does it tend to magnify? I don't want to use the word deficiencies, but
A lack of genetic diversity.
yeah, the lack of genetic diversity. Will it tend to uh, magnify the defects in the species as opposed to with a lot of different animals? You know, you can have variety, and you're not producing the the defective genes are not manifesting themselves in the species.
Sure. So, I mean, it could, but it could do the opposite as well. So you now actually have, because everyone's mating with everyone, you sort of
Yeah.
don't have this sort of inbreeding line here. You don't have this line of inbred animals sort of all following one
Yeah.
after another because I mean, if you look at the genetics of or the paternity in the nest, who is the father of these chicks?
Yes.
The average paternity is the male who is the resident male. He probably on average fathers about half of the chicks in his nest, and the other half come from birds from all over the island. So yes, there could be implications with inbreeding sort of being magnified if certain males tend to dominate in the population. So if you have a really strong male that could go around and impregnate all the females, that would result in inbreeding. But because I don't think that happens, I think these birds, there's so much chaos going on that I think everyone sort of contributes here and there. And even the males who don't have access to a female, so these are the younger males who are excluded from breeding, they actually also get to contribute their genetic material. So you actually increase the effective population size. You almost increase the genetic material going from one. So probably the opposite of what you're saying there.
Okay. That's good.
That is really good.
Yeah.
So then I had another question. Oh crap, I just forgot it. Shoot. Oh yeah. So are the kids getting since they come out fat and looking like mom, are they getting bombarded and ambushed too?
Occasionally, I mean, you see it, and it was reported there was a paper written by someone who recorded that this was happening, and I've seen it a number of times. The males pretty quickly kind of realize they've made a mistake, but they will try and grab and copulate some of these young birds when they first come out of the nest, and I think it's just a case of mistaken identity in
Right,
most cases.
right,
Yeah.
sure. So, but that doesn't that kind of back up the theory that it's really is like strictly visual cues?
I think so. I mean, for me, that's one of the things that really cements that. It's not because I mean, why else would they bother?
Right, because it was you think they would smell like this is a male chick, this is a female chick, if it
Exactly.
was a smell
Exactly.
thing. So do
Yeah.
they? Obviously, they make a chirp, but do they communicate with their chicks, or like after they're doing their alarm bell, like I'm being attacked, or are they silent for the most part?
Yeah, so it depends. The males leading up to when the female is going to breed, he's doing a three-note call. He's got this really melodious sort of three-note call that he does and this is where the different names of the stitchbird. So there's the different Maori names. The one that we most commonly use, the hihi. There's other ones as well. There's one called the tiora, and there's the Kotihe. There's a whole bunch of them. And these two names, like Tiora and Kotihe, they come from the three-note call of the male. So these are like onomatopoeic names. These come from the sound of the birds.
Okay, gotcha.
So the male sort of like Tiora. That's a classic sort of sound you would hear for the male.
Oh, okay.
And then the English name, the Stitchbird, it also comes from the sound of the birds. It's not because they stitch things together. It comes from they've got a call that they do when they're a bit annoyed about things. And it's sort of like this sound.
Oh, okay.
And that it's really, it's kind of unique, and it's really obvious when you hear that the Stitchbird is around. So that's where it gets its name. The Stitchbird is like that bird. It comes from that sound that they do. The females don't call a lot, and once the female's laid her eggs, the whole place almost goes silent. There will be small contact calls that the male and female will do to each other, and there'll be small contact calls that the female does to the chicks as well when they come out of the nest. And inside the nest, there might have been work done since I was there, but I'm not sure about the contact calls inside the nest between the female and the chicks. So that's a possibility. But that's sort of the main thing, is the male's real strong calls that he does, this stitch call that both the male and the female do. And then there's sort of more quieter contact calls that the female and male do. And then, of course, there's the alarm call that the female does when she's being chased by a male. That's sort of what's happening.
So, are the translocation locations, are they taking off? Are they rooting? Are they, helping the cause in terms of increasing the population? And do they have to have artificial feeding sites? You said like the honey feeders, or the what do we call that?
Yeah, good question.
Nectar. We make our nectar. Yeah, I use a one to.
Well, it's for hummingbirds. So
hummingbirds, I don't know if they like the same nectar, but it's 1 part sugar to 4 parts water is what I make it.
Kind of similar. We actually import for the program in New Zealand. They import these hummingbird feeders from the States as the feeding stations that they use there. Good question. So before they put them on the island where I was working, they put them on a bunch of other islands, and these birds, they just died out there because it was not the forest to support them over the years. So every single site they've introduced them to, they have to use these honey water feeders as well. So on Tiri-Tiri-Matangi Island, where I was, there's honey water feeders year round. On Makoia, where they were for a while, there was honey water feeders, and they tried taking them off, and then the population simply stopped breeding as soon as they took away the honey water feeders. On Kapiti Island, they have honey water feeders. In Zealandia, this place in Wellington, they have honey water feeders. And then the 2 new places, there's honey water feeders. So there's ongoing supplementation, management all the time just to keep these birds going when you put them somewhere else.
So nectar from what type of plant is their favorite or most preferred, or is there, I guess, for their livelihood?
Whatever's flowering at the time. So, I mean, there's like the manuka, which is the New Zealand tea tree, which is very small flowers. They'll go on that. There's the pahudakawa, which is like the Christmas tree in New Zealand. It's this amazing, huge tree with these beautiful red flowers. And when they come out on the island at Christmas time, the birds flock to those. So it really just depends what's in flower. They'll basically go from there.
Okay, just whatever's available. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, that makes sense. Wow. Okay. That isn't. I mean, this is all just incredibly amazing. So how many necropsies have you done on these Stitchbirds?
A few. I mean, I used to sample and send off, I mean, probably, I don't know, 10 or 20 of these birds over the years I was there. I did necropsies on. What we did was, in this bird that actually, I got this photo of this when we took out the testicles of this bird, these massive testicles I was talking about earlier. We also open up the brain case as well, because we sometimes take samples from the brain. And I took this photo of the bird, this male's brain next to his testicles, and each of his testicles was bigger than his brain. So it sort of gives you an idea of what they're thinking with during the breeding season.
Well, some people think that that's a human trait too, but you think with the wrong.
Yeah, that's definitely a one-track mind, and that's
yeah.
It. So have you brought any to Sweden with you, or do you have any subjects in Sweden?
Stitchbirds?
Yeah. I mean, it probably would survive, but...
Yeah, no. I mean, when I was there, of course, you collect all sorts of little when you work in the field, you collect feathers, you collect all sorts of things, eggshells and stuff, and nests, and under the regulations for transporting endangered species, you can't take those anywhere. So I
Even for
donated
stuff.
all of those to Auckland Museum. So
Oh,
we sort
okay.
of put everything in there.
So
Okay.
have you climatized to the Swedish climate from Australia
Yeah.
slash New Zealand?
Yeah, I actually went via Antarctica. So I spent 2 years working with the Delhi penguins in Antarctica before I came here. Um,
Wow.
Be back
so
from
that was sort of
penguins.
my acclimatization phase. I've been here for about 15 years now. So it's
Oh, okay.
I hope I've gotten. I don't know. I still don't like the Novembers and Decembers when it gets cold and dark.
Yeah.
No.
But
Yeah.
Yeah.
no one.
What latitude are you at there in Sweden?
I don't know.
Do you know?
Good question.
What city are you in? Okay, we
I'm
won't.
actually not. So you've got Stockholm, which is the capital, and then you go about an hour north of Stockholm. You've got Uppsala, which is where the university is, and then I'm about an hour north of Uppsala in a small town.
Uppsala. We have an Uppsala college here. We don't say Uppsala, we say Uppsala, but uh,
Hmm.
uh, okay. Uppsala, Sweden. All right, I'll tell you in a second.
So did you just happen to
Excellent.
find yours when you were out in, in the remote New Zealand islands, or were you kind of setting out to study them specifically, the Stitchbird?
The, the the Stitch. Well, I set out. Well, when I went to New Zealand, I just went there just to have a break from life,
Okay,
really, just to
fair
go
enough.
climbing
Yeah,
mountains and do things for myself.
okay.
After
Good for
working
you.
as a vet for 5 years, and then I sort of found out about them. I was volunteering on this island because you can do volunteer work, and it was really fun. And then I saw the birds, I read about them, and I thought, "Oh, this is kind of interesting, and no one really knows that much about this behavior." And so I just sort of went to the university. It was very relaxed back then in New Zealand. It might still be. And I sort of said, I want to study this bird. And they said, sure, if you want. And I said, okay. They said, you can apply for money here and get a PhD scholarship. And if you get money, that's good. Otherwise, you just have to fund it yourself. And okay, so I did that, and I got some money I could live on. And
Right.
when you live on the island, you don't pay anything except for food. So I could sort of just live there and be supported that way. And then I sort of did my PhD, and I became a doctor of weird bird
You're
sex
a
in
double
New Zealand.
doctor.
Well,
Yeah, exactly.
in case anyone asks you, you're at 59.8, which is pretty damn cold. It's cold. That's 60 degrees north latitude.
Yeah,
That's cold.
yeah, yeah. It's
Okay.
cold. There are some days walking to the trains to go to the university, and it can get down to about -20, -25, and that's
Yeah,
cold
plus
enough.
the amount of daylight that you have in the winter is probably pretty short. But we're gonna wrap it up on that climate note right now. But
Right. But yeah, we'll have to be back to talk about those penguins. Thank you so much for
yes,
this
No
appreciate your
experience.
worries.
Oh, wait, really quick.
Well,
Your most exciting story from the field or craziest field research moment. It can be from any of your field studies.
craziest man. Well, okay, you've sort of put me on the spot there. The first thing that comes to mind is working in Antarctica, and you have to collect all your own poo because you
You can't leave it
they're-
there.
yeah, and then you
you
actually have to weigh it. So there you go.
have to
Wow.
weigh it. What do
Well,
you?
so
What
this
do they
gets
do?
into the climate thing because they have to burn it, and they actually need to account for all of the emissions in the Antarctic stations. So when you come back from the field, you have to bring back all your poo. It gets weighed, it gets burnt, and then the person responsible for that comes and tells you how much your poo weighed. There you
Exciting.
Wow. Who would have thought?
Well, yesterday we talked about the naked mole rat, and they eat their own poo, so that's maybe a conservation method.
go.
But that's a topic
Okay.
for another day. All right. Well,
Well,
we're going to let you go.
thank you so
Appreciate your
much for your
time.
time
Thank you. It's
No
fun learning
worries.
about this.
missionary sex position in birds.
Yes.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks. See ya.
Bye.